Now, the Gemara that we learned, so I mentioned that with regard to drinking, there's different measurements with how much a person needs to drink in order to bench, in order to say an after blessing. And the Gemara that we learned, it brought this argument of Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda about how much bread does a person need to eat in order to recite the Brochos Hamazon. And we had this argument of is it a kazayas or a kabeya? Is it the size of an olive or an egg? And the problem that we had in the Gemara was that the Gemara seemed to find contradictory statements from both of these rabbis. And one of the ways of reconciling it was switch the names of the rabbis to the other opinions, switch the opinions, and to make it equal, to make the rabbi who says kazayas in this law says it in the other law as well. The rabbi that says kabeya, egg size, in this law says it regarding the other laws as well. So that was one of the ways of answering the question. So what came out from that, according to that opinion, and that was Rabbi Yochanan's way of answering the problem. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Mochlefes hashita." He said, "Change the opinions, and then it conforms to their to the perfectly both locations." Now, if you follow that way of doing things, in other words, if you learn the Gemara or the Mishnah now with that change, what ends up is that Reb Meir holds the size to bench is the size of an egg, and Reb Yehuda says the size to bench is the size of an olive. And that fits very well because we know that's the halacha. The halacha is you bench if you eat the size of an olive of bread. And just to give you an example, I have a book here called the Kazayas. My blurry Kazayas. Anyway, this book tells you, how much you need to eat in order to bench. And it has a section on breads. So, for example, and the same thing would apply to matzah, of course. And for example, a bagel. Yeah, let me unblur my thing here. Oh. Okay. So, for example, a bagel, it says 1/10 of a bagel is the size of an olive. A bagel that has a picture and it gives you the exact measurement. Rye bread, the small loaves of rye, a half of a center slice would be enough to bench, and a quarter of a center slice of the large rye loaf. So it's good to know. These are very practical halachas. How much do you need to eat? You're not eating a lot. Do you need to bench? Now, what does that say about washing? Washing and saying al natilas yodayim. So if you need a half a center slice of a small loaf of rye or a quarter of a center slice for a large rye loaf, quarter of a center slice, that's enough to bench. You'd have to bench if you ate that. But to say the bracha al natilas yodayim, you need double these measurements. So a whole center slice you would need of a small rye loaf to cite the bracha al natilas yodayim. And now with regard to white bread, it would be like a third of a slice. And but to say al natilas yodayim, for washing, you would need 2/3 of a slice. A challah roll. How much of a challah roll do you need to eat to recite the to bench? You need 1/9 of a roll. That's very surprising to some. That in a challah roll, it's a huge. It actually is. It's has a lot of olive sizes in it, and 1/9 of a loaf is enough to bench, but you would need about a quarter of a challah roll in order to wash, to say the bracha al natilas yodayim. How about a matzah? A matzah.
Let them know why they're doing that.
A matzah, 4/10 of a matzah would be enough to say the bracha, the berachas hamazon, and but you would need like 8/10 or 3/4 to say the al natilas yadayim. So it has like a picture of the size of a matzah here. That's how much in order to recite the benching. So it's a very practical. These are very practical laws. Now I mentioned to you there is a little issue, and that is that Abaye says don't switch the names. And Abaye has a way of explaining that Reb Meir really holds regarding the laws of benching Kazayas, and Reb Yehuda really holds regarding the laws of benching the egg size. Now, according to that way of reading the Gemara, reading the Mishnah, now you're stuck because the halacha is supposed to follow Reb Yehuda, and according to Reb Yehuda, it's a size is the size of an egg. And so, following Abaye, how do you reconcile? How do we paskin? What would the halacha be? Because according to Abaye's way, the halacha should follow Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda says the size of an egg, not the size of an olive to bench. So the answer Tosfos gives is, he says, well, we have other stories in the Gemara that Rabbi Yochanan ate an olive and he benched on the olive. He said the al ha'etz val priya, it's eating an olive. And so you see from there that the after blessing, which would be the same rule of after eating an olive for the al ha'etz bracha, or eating bread for the berachas hamazon, it would be basically the same measurement. So you see that the halacha in the Gemara, they followed this Kazayas law. And so even though halacha normally follows Reb Yehuda, but we see stories where Reb Yochanan paskin the size is the size of an olive. So we follow that, even though normally the halacha would be like Reb Yehuda. Now that's a very interesting point that Tosfos makes, and I'll tell you why. You could really ask a strong question on this. According to Reb Yochanan, think about Reb Yochanan. Reb Yochanan says, I'm switching the names of the Mishnah. So according to Reb Yochanan, what does Reb Yehuda hold in the Mishnah? Reb Yehuda holds Kazayas, right? That's not what's written in our Mishnah, but Rabbi Yochanan switches the names. So Rabbi Yochanan switches the names. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Reb Yehuda is the opinion of olive, and Reb Meir is the opinion of egg. According to that, Rabbi Yochanan has to follow of course, Rabbi Yochanan says you follow the olive size, because according to him, that's what it says in the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yehuda. How can we prove that even according to Abaye, who doesn't switch the names, how can we prove according to Abaye that you should follow the size of a kazayas? That's Reb Meir's opinion. That's not Reb Yehuda's opinion. Reb Yochanan followed this view, and we have other Gemaras where Reb Yochanan says the same thing. But he's only following it because he holds that the wording in the Mishnah fits with this. Reb Yehuda is the one who says kazayas according to him. So if we find other Gemaras where Reb Yochanan followed the kazayas law, that's not because we passed in like Reb Meir in this scenario against Reb Yehuda, because Reb Yochanan switched the names, and according to him, this is Reb Yehuda's view. So we can't prove that everyone else follows the law of a kazayas of an olive. So this is a very powerful question. It's asked by Rabbi Akiva Eger on Tosfos. This is a very powerful question on Tosfos. The only way one of the ways of answering it has to do with the fact that we don't find anyone arguing on Reb Yochanan. So Tosfos is only saying, he's not proving from Reb Yochanan, but he's saying from the fact that it seems that that's the accepted view that according from the others, because no one else seems to argue. So you have to add in that point, because from Tosfos himself, the wording, you can't really prove it from Reb Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that the wording was different in the Mishnah. So that's just to give you a little depth of the final conclusion of what the halacha is. But basically, the bottom line is, and this is very practical, it's the size of an olive. And I always encourage people to buy this book because I use it all the time whenever I'm eating a snack or something, just to look it up. How much rice cake do I recite after blessing or not? You want to know, how much American cheese you have. It's a 1 2/3 slice, and it even shows measurements. It's really it's a great book. They really did a good job. At least I hope they did a good job on the final halacha. But anyway, it's called Halachas of Kezias. It's published by Feldheim, and the author is Rabbi Bod. All right. So bottom line is that the measurement of food is a kezias. Now let's jump to drinking. How much do you need to drink in order to say and recite an after bracha on drinking? And so this
Rabbi,
same type. Yes.
I have a question. You were saying about the fact that he ate an olive, and he said an after blessing, that shows that he holds by the size of an olive, right? But there's also a view that you can bench, that you can say an after blessing based on a whole fruit. Right.
So it was discussed in that Gemara over there. That was that's a Yerushalmi. We had a big discussion on that. We discussed that at length, that could be a way of understanding it. It was based on Yerushalmi. Does Yerushalmi argue with the Bavli, with the Babylonian Talmud? We went through this. Sure, it's on our YouTube channel.
Well, maybe that's the situation here, that they concluded that he's holding by a kezias, and he was not holding by a kezias. He was holding by a whole fruit.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And again, we discussed it, but that's not the only source of Rabbi Yochanan. We had a source also on page 48 of Rabbi Yochanan saying kezias, that you don't bench unless that Rabbi Yochanan said Shimon ben Shatach should not have benched when he drank the wine. He should you need to at least have a kezias. I don't know if you remember that, but that was a Gemara that we just learned on page 48. And there also was Rabbi Yochanan said a kezias. So that's not the only source, the kezias. That was one example that Tosfos brings, but he brings another one as well from the previous page, page 48. So you basically see that Rabbi Yochanan follows this kezias law. So getting back to what we were saying, so the question is, so what about drinking? How much do you have to drink? So the interesting thing is that Tosfos over here, who deals with this final halacha, the Tosfos is called, it's Reb Meir Savar, that Tosfos. So he says that Ula Inyan Shtia, the last two lines of Tosfos, he says the Re says that you should be machmir and you recite a bracha, an after bracha, even if you have less than malei lugmav. Malei lugmav means your cheek full. Means if you push the food in your mouth to the side, your cheek is full. That is malei lugmav. That is the measurement of drinking on Yom Kippur, that a person would be transgressing the prohibition to the extent that they would get the penalty of kares. It would be the severe penalty of drinking on Yom Kippur, because on Yom Kippur, the law is that a person is supposed to pain their soul. Paining our soul means we don't eat and don't drink. How much is considered the measurement of eating, that if you eat a small amount, you're still paining your soul. You have to pain yourself. So the measurement of eating there is koisebes, is a large date. The measurement of drinking there is malei lugmav, is this cheekful. And the law of drinking, Tosfos here says, we don't follow the laws of Yom Kippur regarding drinking. Regarding drinking, even if you drank less than a malei lugmav, the halacha is you have to bench on what you drank. What is Tosfos saying? What is the measurement? Let me tell you, malei lugmav, how much is it? Every person is different, of course, but there is an average general assumption, that the average person, the average size mouth is a little more than a half of a revius. A revius is what we make kiddush on generally on Friday night. So a revius is considered maybe around 3-4 ounces, and maybe 2.9, the most lenient view. But that's a revius. So a little more than half of that would be enough to recite an after bracha, according to Tosfos here, and he's following this logic that what is the measurement? It's the size of an olive. That's what he's saying, because a revius is an egg and a half. A half of a revius would be 3/4 of an egg, and which would be 3/4 of an egg would be more than a kazayas, and that would be the size of Yom Kippur. To be to get the penalty of drinking on Yom Kippur, it would be more than the size of an olive. It would be the size of Malei Lugmav for cheekful, which approximately the general size mouth, the regular mouth, the regular size mouth person is average size. It would be less than the size of an egg. It would be like 3/4 of an egg, and which would be more than the size of an olive. And Tosfos says that's not the measurement for saying an after blessing on drinks. That measurement of saying an after blessing on drinks is the size of an olive, the same as food. That's the way Tosfos here holds. And he says, even though on Yom Kippur you wouldn't be obligated for such a thing, who cares? The laws of eating doesn't apply. We don't follow the rules of Yom Kippur. Regarding the laws of eating, we follow kazayas, not the koseves, not the large date, which would be the Yom Kippur rule. We don't follow that regarding blessing, after blessings. We don't follow the Yom Kippur rule. We follow the laws of the blessing, that eating. Achalta means eating the size of a kazayas. So the same thing applies regarding the drinking rule. Tosfos here says that it would follow less than the Malei Lugmav, less than the cheekful, which means that he's following the size of an olive, even for drinking. Now that creates a big problem, because there are reason to say that it should follow Malei Lugmav, cheekful, and there's reason to say it should follow revius. And we have different views regarding these laws. And Tosfos here is of the opinion that the size is the size kazayas. Because of this, the rule of at least when drinking wine is that a person should never drink between the size of an olive and the size of a revius. In other words, either drink very tiny amount or drink a large amount, but don't drink in the middle, because you'll have a question if you can say an after blessing. It would be a questionable after blessing when for such a thing, and therefore it's brought down. You shouldn't drink from the size of an olive to the size of a revius. Anywhere in the middle would be a problem of an after blessing. Now I should also mention that. Yeah,
how many ounces is a kazayit?
Of a drink.
Half a reviut is about 2 ounces, 1.5, 2 ounces. Kazayit is less. It will be what, 1 ounce?
Well, the practical way of calculating is drop an olive into a cup of water. The amount of water that falls out, that's the size of an olive. But the question is, what size olive? There are big olives and there are small olives as well. And we have chumras, we have other rules. But let me just see if this book might say drinks, but I don't know if it has drinks in it. I don't recall seeing any drinks.
You said it's less than a half a reviut. So
yeah, listen.
But how much is kazayit is the question, not the drinking.
Right. The thing is,
the book should tell you how much kazayit.
Yeah, I will tell you. It's in cubic centimeters or something. It's a volume size. You're not going to be able to use it much, but I'll tell you that.
I would.
Here. Yeah. Okay. Cubic. You're gonna. Let me tell you what it says. The exact cubic centimeters.
Rabbi, in cubic centimeters, 1 ounce is approximately 28 to 30 cubic centimeters.
1 ounce is how much?
28 to 30 cubic centimeters.
28.8.
So kezayit is
28.8 cubic centimeters, I think.
28.8.
I'm reading this
It
correctly.
is an ounce. Okay.
It's a little less. Yeah, I think it's a little less than an ounce. But
Yeah, less than an ounce. Okay.
I don't know anyone who could measure. I don't know. Maybe, I guess. But anyway, bottom line is you can't say a bracha achrona on that amount. That would be the questionable amount.
Right.
If you want to be sure, you drink a revius, which is like 2.9 ounces or 3.5 ounces, so on. Okay, so that covers the toisvus that we the drinking element. That this is the source of that very strict view of a kazayas for drinking. This is the source of it is this toisvus based on this Gemara, which says achila is kazayas. The Mishnah we learned. So we had these the different levels of benching of zimun, depending on how many people are in the part of the zimun, part of the grace after meal benching, and are joining together. And we had different opinions. We have Rabbi Yossi Aglili that says it keeps changing dependent on the makelos, the kohol, how many people are in your congregation that you would add a word to the zimun. And Rabbi Akiva argued, and Rabbi Akiva said, "What do you mean in shul? You don't measure how many people are there and say, well, we've got today we got over 100 people. We're going to do a different baruch hu. We're going to add a few words to the baruch hu, right? In shul, it's a one size fits all. Baruch es Hashem Amavarach, right? Baruch es Hashem. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Rabbi Akiva says Baruch es Hashem. That's it. So the same thing would be benching. Now, what would Rabbi Yossi Haglili say to that? Does Rabbi Yossi Haglili argue with Rabbi Akiva in a shul? Rabbi Yossi Haglili says when you're at your house in your dining room, you have 11 people, you do this type of benching. If you have 100 people, you do that benching. You have 1,000 people, another type of bench. 10,000 people, another type of benching. Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Rabbi Akiva argues and he says, no, in shul you don't do this type of thing. In shul it's a Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. That's it. So Rabbi Akiva is saying at home it should be the same thing. Okay, 3 people is one benching, 10 people another benching. And goodbye. I'm not adding more because I have more than once you have your minyan, it's a done deal. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Now, what does Rabbi Yossi Haglili say to Rabbi Akiva? What would he say in the case of a shul? So Tosfos over here deals with that. He says from the Mishnah it implies Rabbi Akiva is arguing with Rabbi Yossi Haglili and telling him off and saying, we find by a shul you don't have this. Now, obviously, what he's saying is that you agree to me that in a shul you don't do this. So why are you doing this in a meal? In a meal, you're switching things around, adding words because you have a large group. In a shul, in a shul and in davening, you don't do such a thing. So he's implying like he's speaking to Rabbi, that he's arguing with Rabbi Yossi Haglili on Rabbi Yossi Haglili's terms. He's not saying, well, we don't follow this. He's telling him off because he's basing it on a shul. That means that Rabbi Yossi Haglili obviously agrees with him about a shul, right? That's what it is. Otherwise, he could just say, listen, I disagree with you. But instead he's saying, no, I'm proving it to you from a shul. It sounds like he's talking to him, and it sounds like Rabbi Yossi Haglili agrees in a shul. You don't do such a thing when you say Baruch Hu, and you don't add words. And so Tosfos says, it sounds like he agrees. So why would Rabbi Yossi Haglili make a difference between a meal and a shul? And Tosfos says, an interesting thing, he says that in a shul, you have people coming, you have people going, and the Shliach Tzibur can't be measuring, looking around and figuring out how many people are here now, how many people were here. And therefore, the shul, they made a blanket, one size fits all. And but with a benching, that people are kavua, they sit there, they're lying together, they're lying, they're meaning in their meal, they're joining together. It's like an official thing. There, you won't make a mistake of how many people you have, and therefore, for such a thing, and people don't leave until after benching. Therefore, for such a thing, there is room to make such a differentiation between the amounts of people. So what's interesting is how they, that a meal had more of a kavios than the shul. That seems interesting that they had, that the meal it was easier to keep track, so to speak, of the amount of people, but the shul, it was like it was too complicated. They couldn't, people leaving, people coming. So that's Tosfos's explanation why Rabbi Yitzchok Lili would say that there's a difference. It's sort of like a practical thing that just would be impossible to keep track. So let's start from the Gemara on page 49b, and we'll start, even though we did some of it yesterday. Gemara on page 49b, we're on the bottom two lines from the bottom. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, a person should not exclude themselves from the rule. And what Shmuel is saying is that the Mishnah had said that when you have 4, you should say Baruch Hu. And Baruch Hu when you're benching. In other words, instead of Nevarech Sha'achal Mishlei, Baruch Hu Sha'achal Mishlei. You say Baruch Hu, bless. And he's sort of like commanding the others to do the blessing. Bless Sha'achal Mishlei, he that we ate from. And that's what the Mishnah said. Now, Shmuel says, really, a person shouldn't do that. Shouldn't, even if you have 4, you're allowed to say Baruch, but it's better to say Nevarech. And this way, if you say Nevarech, let us bless, by doing that, you're including yourself, and that would be better, to include yourself and don't exclude yourself. The Gemara now asks a question. Tanan b'shleisha v'hu Eimer Baruch. The Mishnah, we learned in a Mishnah, our Mishnah here, a few lines earlier, it says when you have 4 people, which means 3 and the mezamein, 3 and the leader, you say Baruch Hu. And the Gemara is understanding that when you say Baruch Hu, it's the Mishnah said that it's better to say Baruch Hu than Nevarech. So how could Shmuel tell us that it's better to say Nevarech and include himself with everyone else instead of Baruch Hu, when the Mishnah says when you have 4, you should say Baruch Hu? Now, Tosfos explains that the reason why the Mishnah, when it said Baruch Hu, we think it means you have to say Baruch Hu. Tosfos over here says is because the Gemara is understanding that Baruch Hu is probably better to say Baruch Hu, at least according to the Mishnah, because Baruch Hu sounds like you're commanding them to bless, and Nevarech sounds like let us bless. Maybe we should. I'm asking permission from you. Could we bless? So Baruch Hu sounds more like a command, and what that means is that Nevarech also means let us bless. It's a command, but it sounds less of a command, and therefore it would seem that the Mishnah is emphasizing that we should say Baruch Hu because it basically sounds more like a command than Nevarech. So now Rashi says that the fact that the Mishnah says Baruch Hu, it sounds better because he's emphasizing that you are a group even without me. So that's maybe the reason why the Gemara understands Baruch Hu. The Mishnah said Baruch Hu. It seems like it's preferable. That's the way it should be. So we have two reasons to understand why the Gemara thinks the Mishnah said Baruch Hu for 4. It should be Baruch Hu and not Nevarech, either because Baruch Hu sounds more like a command, or because Baruch Hu is emphasizing that you people are a large amount already, and you don't even need me. You can, even if I wouldn't be here, there's a nice sized group. So it's emphasizing that there is a larger group praising Hashem. So the Gemara answers and says, Ema af Baruch. Let's say that you can also answer Baruch Hu, that the Mishnah said you also recite Baruch Hu, but the Mishnah didn't really say which one is preferred. It's giving you both options. Umikol makom, nevertheless, nivarech adif, the word nevertheless, nivarech is better to say nivarech. And it would be better to say nivarech, and that's what Shmuel is saying, that nivarech is actually better. Why is nivarech better? It's better to say nivarech because you're not excluding yourself. So it would make sense to say nivarech because you want to include yourself and not exclude yourself. And Baruch Hu is sort of like excluding yourself, and nivarech is including yourself. So even though both are equal, you could say Baruch Hu, or you could say nivarech, but nevertheless, Shmuel says it's better to say nivarech because you want to include yourself. And if you don't say nivarech, if you don't include yourself, then both of them are equal, nivarech or Baruch Hu. In other words, both of them, you could say either one, but nivarech ends up being better because you're including yourself. Now, the Amar Rav Barava, Amri Beirav, Rav Barava said, Amri Beirav, the base medrash of Rav, they said, Tanina, we learned this in a Mishnah. And this is a proof that Baruch Hu or Nevarech are acceptable. And what's the proof? Vav nechlakin ad yud. If you have 6 people that ate together, they could divide into 2 groups. Now, we learned in our Mishnah that if you have 3 people, you can only say Nevarech. And if you have 4 people, you say Baruch Hu. Now, if Baruch Hu is better than Nevarech, then I would say 6 people should not divide up into 2 groups. Because if you divide up into 2 groups, then you don't have the 4, you only have 3. And if you only have 3, you can't say Baruch Hu, you can only say Nevarech. And yet, the Mishnah that we bring from, this Mishnah says that if you have 6 people, you could already divide up into 2 groups. So the Gemara says that I'm sorry, I see Yehuda's calling. I think he probably tried to get on. Let me just see if I wasn't looking at the at anyone waiting to get on. Let me just see if Yehuda, are you trying to get on? I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at the participants. Were you trying to get on? Oh, do you want to try to get on now? You can try to get on now. I'm so sorry. I was so engrossed. I didn't. We got very involved in a Taisus, so I didn't even realize what was going on. Okay, join now. Okay.
As long as you stop, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why would people want to say Baruch Hu instead of Rabotai Nevarech?
Right. So we just said that there seems to be,
you saying 6 should not separate because they can say Baruch Hu. Why is it?
Why is it better?
Baruch Hu means
right.
Each one of those 6
you should.
Is telling the others to bless.
Right.
But if you say Nevarech, all of us say, let's do it together.
Right. So Shmuel says what you're saying, that, Nivarech is preferable. But
Yeah.
what the Mishnah was saying was that Baruch Hu works. You couldn't say Baruch Hu if you were only 3. But if you have 4, you can say Baruch Hu.
Okay.
But why is it better? So initially, the Gemara, Tosfos tries to give an explanation why the Gemara thought that Baruch Hu might be better. But that's not the conclusion. The conclusion is Baruch Hu is okay. That's all the Mishnah was basically saying, is that Baruch Hu you could say. You wouldn't have been able to say it with 3, but you could say it with 4.
Baruch Hu is a command to others. So even
Right.
all 6 say Baruch Hu, they say to each other, you bless.
But you're not in it, because you're just telling them,
Right,
you people
right.
bless.
Right.
So so the point is that Shmuel, what you're saying really follows what Shmuel says, and that is that you really should say Nivarech because it's preferable. Nivarech is adif, is better because it includes more inclusive. Now the Gemara proves it now, and we are on page 50a. On 50a, the third line. I amrit bishleima, if you say Nivarech, adif, that Nivarech is better, it will go good. It'll fit very well. That Nivarech is better. Mishum hachi, because of this, nechlakim, you could divide into 2 groups of 3. In other words, 6 people can divide into 2 groups for a zimun, and Nivarech is better, and therefore you could divide, 6 people can divide into 2 groups.
You don't have to, but you can.
You can. But if you say Baruch Hu is better, if you say Baruch Hu is better, why would you divide when you have 6? You should wait till you have 8 to divide, because Baruch Hu you can only do with 4s. So if Baruch Hu is better, then you should wait. Not at 6. You shouldn't be dividing at 6. You should wait till you have 8 people to divide, so you could have you could do Baruch Hu, and at 6 you should not be dividing. Rather, we see from here that Nivarech is better. Now, I translated this according to Rashi. According to Tosfos, the way to translate some of these adifs is not that it's better, but it's equal. And the reason why you would actually I shouldn't even say what I said. I said that I learned this according to Rashi. Not exactly. There is a little problem here on the Gemara. The problem is that which one is really better, Nivarech or Baruch Hu? From this Mishnah about 6 people dividing, which one is better? Do you see that Nivarech is better, or do you see that it's acceptable? From the Mishnah Tanina, from this Mishnah about 6 people can divide up, what does that tell you? That says that 6 people can divide into 2 groups of 3. Now, does that tell you that 3 is better, Nivarech is better than Baruch Hu? Or does it just say that Nivarech is equal to Baruch Hu?
Nivarech is better.
You don't see it from there. You see it from Shmuel's statement. But actually from the actual
Either one
source,
of them is good.
I'm sorry?
Either one of them is good.
Either one of them is good. That's all you see. Because you see that if you have 6, you could divide. If you have 8, you could also divide. If you have 6, you could divide. See, Nivarech is okay, is acceptable. There's no better doing Baruch Hu than Nivarech. And therefore you could divide at 6. But does it mean Nivarech is better than Baruch Hu? Doesn't really prove that. So because of that, Rashi and Tosfos are bothered. Why does the Gemara use the word adif? That it's better. It's not better, it's equal. So what do you mean, Shma Mina Nivarech adif? It should say Shma Mina Nivarech, Shma Mina that they're equal. So Rashi changes the girsa. He says you can't say the word adif. Elalav Shma Mina that af Baruch Hu. He says Baruch Hu also is acceptable. So that is the way Rashi learns. So Rashi actually doesn't have the word adif here at the end. because you can't really say it's better. You can just say they're equal. Baruch Hu and Nevarech are equal. And Shmuel says, and you know what? Nevarech is actually preferable. It's adif. But the Gemara itself doesn't prove it's adif. The Gemara proves that they're equal. So Taisa says, I don't have to remove the word adif. Taisa says, I'm going to translate adif differently. Adif doesn't mean preferable. Adif means important. And Taisa says, translated means important. Shema Mina, Nevarech is adif. Nevarech is also significant. And then Baruch Hu is not better. That's all. In other words, translate the word adif differently. Rashi doesn't learn that way because Rashi translates adif to be better, preferable. But Taisa says adif, you know what, there are cases where you have this term adif just means that it's significant, it's chashuv, and you don't push it aside because the other one's not preferable. That's all adif means. It doesn't mean necessarily preferable. Could mean preferable, but there's another translation of adif that means that it's significant. And Taisa says that Rashi removes the word adif, but Taisa says, but adif can go good according to the way I'm translating the word adif, that it's acceptable. Okay, so that is the Gemara here, that Shema Mina Nevarech adif. Shema Mina, we see from here Nevarech is significant. Shema Mina, we see that, and therefore you could divide up at 6 to 2 different groups of zimun, and this is very practical, by the way. If you're trying to go somewhere, you're eating with other people, and you want to leave, you make your zimun with your 3 people. There's another 3 people on the table. They'll make their own zimun. You make your zimun. The other person is going to the buffet and getting his food, and this other person is talking. No problem. You do your 3 people and goodbye. Because you have between 6 and 10 people, you could divide up into 2 different groups, right? So you can do your zimun. A very practical law. And what do you say? Well, our Gemara says, according to Shmuel, Nevarech is really the preferable way to do things because it is inclusive. You're including yourself and so on. The Tanya Nami Hachi, and the Gemara continues on the 5th line. Tanya Nami Hachi.
In the dictionary, I looked. There was only one explanation to adif, preferable.
So you got to have a Tosfos dictionary.
Right.
Tosfos argued on that dictionary, and he has his own. That's a Rashi dictionary. So Tosfos says adif could mean significant. Now Tanya Nami Hachi, we also have a brisa 5 lines down from the top. We're on page 50a. We also have a brisa this way. Bein shamar Baruch Hu, bein shamar nevarech, ein toifsin isai al kaf. Whether a person says Baruch Hu or nevarech, we don't stop him. Banak donim, but those people that are punctilious, toifsin isai al kaf, they'll stop him because they'll say, you know what, you really should include yourself and follow Shmuel. So you should really follow Shmuel's law, and you should, because of that, you should include yourself and say Nivarech. Of shel adam. And now the Gemara says, from the brachos of people, actually the brisa continues that from the brachos of the way a person recites a bracha, Nicker, it's recognizable, im Talmud Chacham hu, im lav, if he is a scholar or not. How careful he is in his brachos. Ketzad, how do you see this? Rebbe says, Uvetuvai harezet Talmud Chacham, umituvai harezet bor. If he says from your good, that is a problem. If from your good we live, chayinu, that's a problem because he's saying that we only get some of Hashem's good, the amount that we need to live, and really you should be praising Hashem more than it's just. We're not just making it. We're not just making ends meet, but we're thanking Hashem for all the abundance that Hashem gives us. So mituvai would imply mituvai chayinu. We only got some, enough to live. But uvetuvai chayinu actually is much better praise because he's saying with Hashem's good we live. And it means that of course Hashem gives us abundance, not just enough to live. So he's being more thankful to Hashem. Now, Amar le Abaye l'Rav Dimi. Let me just read those words one more time. Rebbe says, Uvetuvai hareza Talmud Chacham. If he says Uvetuvai, he is considered a scholar because he said the good nusach. Umituvai hareza bor. He says mituvai, that's a bor. That's like someone who's like ignorant. And nowadays this doesn't prove much because you just read it in the siddur. It's in the olden days when it was unclear what the nusach, what the text was, and then you can tell who's a scholar and who isn't. Nowadays it just means you know how to read. But the olden days, you could tell if someone was a scholar or someone was a bor. Now, the Gemara continues and says that asks a question on Rebbe, Amar le Abaye l'Rav Dimi, Vaksiv, Berchoscha Yavayrach, Beis Avdecha Li'olam. There is a verse in Shmuel Beis that says, from your blessings, you should bless the house of your servant forever. So you see that there is a concept of saying, from your blessings. So when we say that in benching, we said that's considered a bor. But if it seems like this is a prayer David HaMelech said, that he says, from your blessings, give us, to bless us. So it sounds like it's a David HaMelech didn't do something wrong. Sounds like this is the appropriate way to say it. So the Gemara answers that that when you're asking for something, you don't want to ask, I need everything. I want you to give me everything. That is not appropriate. So you say, from your blessings, give me. But when you're thanking Hashem, that's when you're thanking Hashem, that's when you should not be saying, from your blessings, mituvai, from your goodness, that's how I'm able to live. Like you're not giving me enough goodness. And the Gemara asks, nami, when you're asking, haksiv harchev ticha va'amaleu. Hashem says, widen your mouth and I will fill it. And what Hashem is saying is ask what you want. And why did David only say, mi berchaischa? He should have asked for more because Hashem says, ask for what you want. So the Gemara answers, no. When it says, tarchav picha ba'amaleu, that's talking about words of Torah that you could ask Hashem all that you want. But other bakashas, other requests, you should not be asking for everything. You ask for, from Hashem's blessings, please bless us, from your blessings. You don't be a chazan. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Rebbe says, Uvatuvai chayinu, betuvai chayinu, hareza Talmud Chacham. When a person says betuvai, that is the way a scholar says. That's a scholar. That's a sign of a scholar. Chayim, if he didn't say chayinu, but he says chayim, with your good is life, hareza bor, that is a bor. Why is chayinu better than chayim? Because it's implying like he's excluding himself from Hashem's life, that Hashem gives life, but not to me. He's not including himself. Chayinu, we live. He should be including himself that I'm getting my life from you. It sounds like when he says chayim, he's like everyone else lives from you. I'm on my own. Nahar Bloi Masni Ipcha. There was someone from Nahar Bil, a certain place. Or the person from Nahar Bil, which there is a Gemara that says that this refers to Rami, the person by the name of Rami Bar Barbie. But anyway, our Gemara just says Nahar Bloi Masni Ipcha. There was a scholar from Nahar Bloi who learned the opposite. And he said that you should say chayim because you're including the whole world instead of chayinu, which implies that you're only talking about the people sitting around the table. So there's another way of reading it. Again, you have like different you could translate things differently. So the way he said it, Chayim sounds like the whole world lives from Hashem. Chayinu just means us sitting around the table, our group of Zimun. So that's the way he learned that you really should say Chayim. But less Hilchos Kinahar Bloy, but the halacha doesn't follow the rabbi, the scholar from the Nahar Bloy. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Nevarech she'achalnu mishaloi is hareza Talmud Chacham. L'mi she'achalnu mishaloi hareza bor. If you say Nevarech, let us bless she'achalnu mishaloi, that we ate from, that's a scholar, the way a scholar says it. If you add the word l'mi to who that we ate from, that's a bor because he's implying like he's talking about the host. That he's not thanking Hashem, but he's thanking the host. Why does it imply that he's thanking the host? Because Lamisha Achal Mishalai implies the person that we got food from. So other people get food from someone else. We got food from this guy, from this host. So I'm thanking this host versus some other host. And that would be the exact opposite of what you're trying to do here. You're trying to thank Hashem, not trying to thank the host. The host you can thank before the meal, after the meal, during the meal, fine. But this benching you're thanking Hashem for, the zimun you're thanking Hashem, so therefore you should not add the word lemi. Now, Rav Acha has a question on this. Amalei Rav Acha, read the Rav Ashi. Rav Acha, the son of Rabba asked Rav Ashi, Amrinon, don't we say in the Haggadah, Lemisha Asa, Lavisenu, Belanu, Askol Anisa Me'elu? In the Haggadah, we add the word Lemi to who did all these miracles, right? And we say Lemisha Asa, Lavisenu, Belanu, Askol Anisa Me'elu. It's like towards the end of the Haggadah. Towards the end of the Magid of the Haggadah, you say this almost near the Bracha. So you say this word Lemi. You add Lemi, even though you're talking about Hashem. So Amar Le. So Rav Ashi answered him. Hasa Mukha Milsa. There, it's obvious that you're referring to Hashem. Man Ovid Nisi Kudshabrichu. Who does miracles? Hashem does miracles. You're talking about miracles. You obviously Kudshabrichu, it's Hashem who does miracles, and therefore you could add the word Lemi over there because that's not a problem. But by Zimun, there's someone you might mistaken it for, and that is the host. And therefore, you would not say the word Lemi Shachal Mishlo. You say Baruch Shachal Mishlo. Again, these are not such practical halachas because we have a bencher nowadays, and in the bencher it says exactly the wording. But what you do know is where the source of the words of the Zimun come from, and it's based on this Gemara, and you know why we say it this way and not that way. Why does it specifically have to be done in this way? We don't want it to sound this. We don't want to sound like that. We don't want to sound like this. And so you have the reason why the bencher, why we have it, why the nusach is this way, that you're learning from this Gemara. The Gemara continues. It says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Baruch she'achalnu mishaloi, hareza Talmud Chacham. If a person answers for the Zimun, he says, Baruch she'achalnu mishaloi, that is a scholar. But al hamazain she'achalnu, if you say for the mazain, for the sustenance that we ate, and you don't say mishaloi from him, Harei Zebor, that would be a bor. In other words, that would be someone who's ignorant. You should say mishaloi from him.
I guess it means from his.
From Hashem.
Yeah.
So you have to say she'achalnu mishaloi, from his. You're emphasizing that it's his. that it's Hashem's. Okay. Amar Rav Huna B'reid Rav Yeshua Loi Amran Ela B'Shleisha Deleka Shem Shemayim. This statement that you shouldn't say Alamazon Sha'achalnu is when you have three, and you're not mentioning Hashem's name in the Zimun. You could make a mistake. Aval Ba'asara, but if you're saying Hashem's name with 10, Dika Shem Shemayim Mukha Milsa, it's obvious that when you said Sha'achalnu for the food that we ate, that you're referring to Hashem. Kidetnan, as we have learned in a Mishnah, the way a person blesses, that's how you answer. And Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael Elokei Atzvakos. So we learned in the Mishnah that when you have a large group, you keep on adding these extra statements. Elokei Atzvakos Yeshav Akurim Ala Mazon She'achalnu. And in the Mishnah it says Ala Mazon She'achalnu, and even without the word mishalai, it is okay because you're emphasizing Hashem's name. Therefore, it's not an issue. It's not a problem because you're saying Hashem's name in that language. So again, if you look in the Mishnah, if you look at the Mishnah on the previous page, 49b, and you look 5 lines up from the bottom, look at how it ends. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Elokei Yisrael Elokei Tzvakos Yoshev Akurim Ala Mazon She'achalnu. 5 lines up from the bottom. So you see, it doesn't say Mishaloi. So bottom line is that that's acceptable because you're saying Hashem's name. Okay, we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.